Jake, Crulee podcast, episode 16. I want to thank you all for tuning into another transmission. I have a guest today, Joshua Shea. And Joshua, I checked out your content. I listened to a couple of podcasts, looked at your website, and just seen the phenomenal work that you've been doing. And I thought you just had such a fascinating story and just this life experience that you could share with us all. I like to have conversations with people who offer insight, wisdom, knowledge, who have been through difficult times in their life and overcome challenges, and they can share those with us so that, we potentially don't need to go through that pitfall that, let's say, you specifically experience. So I'm just going to give you a brief moment here to just give us an introduction to the work you are doing specifically today.
All right. Thank you very much for inviting me on the show, Jake. I appreciate it. As you mentioned, my name is Joshua Shea. I was a pornography addict for 24 years. I have been clean for the last 8 years. I've written 4 books about it. I did the TED Talk thing before the pandemic. I was doing a lot of speaking, a lot of lecturing, colleges, libraries, that kind of stuff. Once the pandemic hit, I became trained as a certified porn addiction coach, a certified betrayal trauma coach, and also a therapeutic disclosure specialist. So those are the 3 things that I do now. It turns out I love those more than anything else I've ever done in my life. I was a journalist for almost 30 years prior to moving over to this line of work and this type of lifestyle. But I absolutely love it, and now I spend my time doing podcasts like this. I'm the most interviewed person in the world in the last 5 years about pornography addiction. And then I do a lot of one-on-one work with men and women who deal with porn addiction or their partners who are suffering the fallout and the trauma from it.
Yeah, I want to ask you, how does it feel having gone through your porn addiction and now being, let's say, one of the leading voices on porn addiction? How do you feel putting yourself out there to the public and sharing your story?
It feels natural to me, and I guess that's why I do it. When I was when my life changed forever, when I ended up losing a job, I was also an alcoholic. That was one of the big things. It was a 1-2 punch. I quit them both at the same time in early 2014, and ultimately, um, I recognized that there's just, especially at the time, there was not enough out there about this. I'm the kind of geek who can sit and read, a medical journal. I can sit and read these studies and I enjoy them. But just as I know there are people out there who read Shakespeare for fun. No idea who the hell they are, but I know they exist. And I'm the kind of geek who likes to read those medical papers. So I was reading a lot of medical papers about addiction, porn addiction, sex addiction, but there was nothing out there for the average person. When I would go to a bookstore or even look on Amazon, there was so few resources for the average person who wanted to know about porn addiction. And since I'd spent 30 years as a journalist, I thought, maybe I'll mix my story with some statistics, with some actual facts. So I did that for my first book. What blew my mind, I thought that'd be the only thing I would do and contribute to this world. But after that book was released, it blew my mind how many mothers and sisters and girlfriends and wives and husbands and fathers and concerned people said, "Oh my God, I have a porn addict in my life and I need your help fixing them." And, first you have to tell them, "I'm sorry, but nobody can fix them but themselves." But you can be a source of inspiration. You can be a source of nudging them towards the right thing. So I started to learn about betrayal trauma. I started to learn how the families can help. And I ended up writing a second book about that with a licensed marriage and family therapist. He wrote from the expert point of view. I wrote from the former user point of view. And it is still to this day our bestseller. That's called He's a Porn Addict Now What? Copies of that sell absolutely every day, and I'm proud of that book being out there. I have written 2 others. My most recent was called I'm reading this book about porn addiction for a friend. because I always made the joke, if anybody was ever going to read about porn addiction, they'd have to claim they were doing it for a friend. So that's why I called that book that. But yeah, I'll tell you, Jake, I absolutely love to sit one on one and just talk about what's bothering somebody. Why did they start this? Why do they continue it? What role is it playing in their life? How is it kidnapping their lives? How is it holding them hostage? What is it doing to their relationships with other people? And why did this all start the way it did in the first place? What are the events that caused them to become the person they are today? And when somebody is dedicated to going through this, like I was back in 2014 and 15, really sinking your teeth into recovery, really sinking your teeth into the neuroplasticity of the brain and changing it, it's amazing what miracles can occur. And like I said, I'm now over 8 years sober. That's over 3,100 days sober. I would have never told you that I could do that any time in my life. I was married to my wife, but I was really married to the alcohol and really married to the porn. And thankfully, here I am all this time later, and now I can be the guy who says, "Okay, I screwed up. I was embarrassed. I felt judged. I was hiding this." And this was all before high-speed internet. High-speed internet has changed the game on this forever, and it's now a fact that we need to start talking about this immediately. I'm in the right place at the right time. Lord knows it's not to make money, because I'm certainly not making very much money doing this stuff. I could go be a ghostwriter, or a freelance writer and make a lot more money, but this just feels like the right thing to do. What can I do to help people not battle with this beast of pornography that I did for so damn long? And that's what feels right. And if I get embarrassed along the way, if somebody shames me along the way, if somebody acts like a troll along the way, well, I will take 100 trolls if it helps one person. And that's kind of the way I have to look at it day in and day out, is that I know I'm helping people and I don't care what anybody else thinks about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And congratulations on sobriety. Just a
Thank you.
phenomenal thing to do. I do love when people are able to go through challenges and hard times and truly come out the other side a changed person. And just to see you change and then, want to reach out and offer support to other people, um, that deserves a lot of praise. So, congratulations to you. I have had friends in the past, back in high school, who have suffered from porn addictions. And, they would tell me about how they'd just be watching it all the time, and they would be experiencing erectile dysfunction
Yeah.
and all this bad stuff. Let's call it bad stuff that happens when you do consume a lot of porn. Just to frame this conversation, can you define, like, specifically what a porn addiction is?
Sure. No, absolutely. Now we have to remember, addiction is a label. All addiction is it's a collection of symptoms, just like almost any, and addiction does deal with mental health. Almost everybody who is an addict has a mental health issue. That doesn't mean everybody with a mental health issue is an addict, but almost everybody who is an addict has a mental health issue. And when you're talking about mental health issues, you're talking about symptoms. What makes somebody have ADD? What makes somebody have bipolar? What makes somebody have addiction? It's that they follow a list of symptoms. You can't give me a blood test to realize that I have bipolar. You can't give me a blood test to say, "Oh, you're an addict of this." Unfortunately, those just don't exist. So it's a matter of, what is your behavior like? What are the urges like that you're having? What are the inner voices saying? How are you feeling physically? In my book, I list 11 different symptoms of addiction. And I say, if you fall into four or more of them, you can pretty much assume that you are, the definition of addict. If you've got two or three, that's definitely a slippery slope that you have to pay attention to. To me, in the absolute nutshell, an addict is somebody who understands there will be negative consequences of a certain behavior, yet they cannot stop that behavior because it has too much of a hold over them, no matter how much they promise themselves. When you're making promises to yourself, oh, I'm only going to look at porn twice this week, and 2 days from now, you've reached your limit. Or I'm only going to look for 30 minutes and then 2 hours later you're still looking. You know that addiction is going to end up in a bad place, but it doesn't stop you. And there are other symptoms like replacing things you used to like to do with it, using it in inappropriate places. A whole bunch of them that are easy to find online. I just certainly didn't invent the symptom list. But the thing that I always like to drive home is that if you're questioning if you have a problem, if you're questioning if you have an addiction, odds are where there's smoke, there's fire. Do you ask yourself if you have a vacuuming addiction? Do you ask yourself if you have a riding around on fire trucks addiction? No, because you don't. So if you're asking yourself if you have an addiction or if you have a problem, odds are you may. And that's when it's time to go get some help because I would have told you, here I was, professional guy. I owned a publishing company where we put out 3 magazines. I was on my local city council. I was on a whole lot of boards. I helped create one of the biggest film festivals in the Northeast United States. I was on top of the world. People would see me with my 2 kids and my wife and my nice house, and they would be like, that guy cannot be a porn addict. And that's not true. I have been in 2 different rehabs, one for alcohol, one for porn. I have been in 1,000,001 different support groups from, just local groups to 12 steps. I've helped so many people myself as a coach. And the one thing I can tell you, there is no stereotypical porn addict. You do not fall outside the bounds of who a porn addict can be because anybody can be a porn addict. Man, woman, I've met them as young as 13 years old. I've met them as old as, 75. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter where you got your education. Anybody can be a porn addict, including you.
I was hoping you could take us back, like take me and the listeners back to when your addiction first began. When did you first start to view porn? Not like in your very first time in your life, but when did this
Yeah.
experience start to build for you like a snowball effect?
Well, I am very, very stereotypical, especially for the pre-internet generation of being a porn addict. Dr. Patrick Carnes, who's kind of the godfather of studying sex and porn addiction, he has his giant first study looked at thousands of men in the United States. And what he found was that just over 70% of men who were porn or sex addicts had some kind of history of physical abuse in their background. Just over 80% had some kind of history of sexual abuse in their background. And over 90% had some sort of history of mental or emotional abuse. All of this abuse creates trauma. If the trauma is not worked through, it becomes unresolved. Well, unfortunately, most of us discovered pornography as this trauma was being dealt with. And instead of resolving the trauma, we used our addiction as a great big patch, a great big bandage that we put across it, and then we went on with our lives. And while the addiction certainly helped with that big thing that was that abuse, getting through that stuff, well, you know what? You have a bad day at school. You have a bad day at work. Somebody says something mean to you. And, well, I need a pick me up. Well, I think subconsciously we think, gee, if that porn helped me through all that really bad stuff, this is only a medium bad day, or this isn't even that bad a day. I bet it can help me now. And people keep using it. People keep using it. And they start to use it as a panacea and as the answer for basic things like anxiety, basic things like stress that we all deal with. Meanwhile, that trauma sits up on a shelf. It never got resolved. And ultimately, that is going to come back and haunt you. That's why we have so many people now in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who are going through rehab, who are doing all of this trauma stuff. Why have words like narcissist and gaslighting suddenly become so popular? It's because there's this generation of people my age who are discovering, holy shit, we didn't deal with this stuff. And what happens is that, we have I describe it like a cut in your arm. You've got this big cut of trauma. And what we do early on is we wrap it up with addiction. It's like we take this trauma, we wrap it up and put it on the shelf. Nothing happens. When you wrap a bandage around a wound, that bandage doesn't do anything to it. Bandage doesn't do anything for it. It actually hides it. You can forget about it. You can move on from it. Oh, it's just a bandage, whatever. I don't even notice it anymore. Well, when it comes time to notice it and you unwrap it, what you have is you still have an infection there. You still have a giant cut there, and it is full of trauma, and it has been seeping and just sitting there for years, and you need to work on this. Addiction is not the main problem. Addiction is a symptom of a bigger problem, and that bigger problem 99% of the time is going to be trauma. So in my life, when I was a young child, I suffered at the hands of a babysitter and a couple of other older people, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and mental abuse. And I think that when I discovered pornography, it was 12 years old. It was introduced to me by an older cousin who I know had no ill will or anything like that. He just introduced it to me. But I tell you, I talked to some people who were like, yeah, I developed an addiction over time. That's not the way it was for me. For me, it was like a lightning bolt came down and hit me. When I opened the pages of that magazine, he had a couple of, mid 80s hardcore porno magazines, and it was like something hit me that, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, this is answering my questions. This is making me feel better. I only had to see this for a couple seconds, and it was immediately making me feel better from something. It was making me escape. The only time I've ever felt this way, otherwise, was 2 years later when I was at a wedding and I got drunk for the first time. And suddenly I was like, oh my goodness, I can dance and I'm funny and I look good. And it was that lightning bolt hitting me, telling me, oh my goodness, I have discovered something that is going to help me get through life. And it really was. 12 years old with porn, 14 years old with alcohol, whether I was in high school or I had gone off to university, early in my career, late in my career, early in my marriage, excuse me, towards the middle parts, it didn't really matter. I always had these two things. I had my porn and I had my alcohol. No matter what was going on in my life, they were my two crutches. They were my two friends I could count on to always make me feel better. But what I didn't realize along the way was that I developed a pretty severe addiction to both of them.
And having gone through those addictions, like at your peak, how were you going about? Because were you married at the time? Did you have a family? Uh,
Not when I was 12.
oh no,
Um,
sorry. Um, so that's when it began for you, when you were 12.
12 years old was when it began. And I can tell you, by the time I was 15 years old, when I was in, 10th, 11th grade, before I had a driver's license or a car, if I wasn't doing something after school, my school was about 2-3 miles away. You can convert to kilometers, and I would get on my bike. I'd ride my bike to school in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I'd ride my bike to a video store. And this was back right when Blockbuster and some of these big box stores were starting to, push out the mom and pops. So
Mm.
the mom and pop independent stores, they would rent anybody anything just to get your $2. So one day when I was 14, um, I felt like I was a little badass, so I just walked into that store and I walked right to the back where they kept the adult videos, and I went through those swinging saloon doors that they had to keep people out, I guess. And I got in there and I was like, "Oh my God, I made it in here." And I just grabbed 2 videos off the shelf, didn't even look at them, and went up to the front desk, put them down, and they were like, "What's your number?" And I was like, 3660. That was my membership number. I remember it to this day because I said it so many times. 3660. And they rented me, for $4, they rented me 2 porno tapes. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to try something else. So I rode my bike about a half block down to an independent convenience store that was run by an old family. And I went to the beer case and I actually took 2 beers out of a 6-pack. And I carried 4 beers in a 6-pack container to the front counter, and all the guy did was ring it up 4 times and then say whatever it was, $4.75 at the time or whatever it was. And I bought it. And it was like, holy shit. I have 2 porno tapes and 4 beers in my bag now. And this was pretty much my everyday after school for several years in high school. I would ride my bike or later drive my car. I would rent 2 porno movies. I would go buy 4 or 5 beers. I would go home. My parents weren't home yet. I'd watch 1 porno movie and drink 2 or 3 of the beers. And then my parents would come home
Yeah.
and I would live my life like my normal self. And then after everybody went to bed, I made sure everybody was asleep. I watched, because I had a VCR and a TV in my room. I'd watch the other porno movie and I'd drink the other 2 or 3 beers, which by this point were warm because I couldn't keep them in my fridge. So every night, 2 or 3 warm beers and the other porno movie. And this is what I did year after year for several years in a row. And I know some of those nights I was too tired and I didn't want to, but most nights I made the time. Most nights I wanted to. Even if I had a great day at school, I wanted to. And then the first time that I ever felt kind of weird about it was my senior year of high school, when it was after a soccer practice, everybody, or football as the rest of the world likes to call it. I went to a friend's house after our practice, and he had a porno tape and he put it in the VCR, and everybody's sitting there cracking jokes and making fun of it. And I'm sitting there very, very uncomfortable because this is not my relationship with pornography. I don't sit there and make fun of it. I watch it quietly and do my business with myself. And, that's what I do. I'm not sitting here making fun of this. So I recognized at that point that it was very different for me than it was for other people. We didn't all have, smartphones in our pockets. We could not, nowadays, if you can spell man, sex, and woman, 7-year-old can find porn online. That wasn't the way it was back then. It was still something that wasn't super easy to get your hands on. Not hard, but not super easy. And I know how much I suffered with it then. And that's part of the reason I'm out there doing this now, because I think, my God, what if you would have given 10 or 11-year-old Josh a smartphone? Because my parents would have. I would have been mature enough to have one. And then there I am at 12 years old. I pick up my phone and la 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 la, the greatest porn computer ever created is the smartphone. And we're sending them out with 10 and 11-year-olds every day. What would have happened to me if I had that? I can't even imagine what would have happened to me. So I feel like we're in a very critical point in our history right now when it comes to this. And I tell people, I'm not anti-porn. I am pro-healthy sexuality. Being anti-porn is ridiculous because people have always been interested in the depiction of sexuality. You can go back, tens of thousands of years and see little statues they made and cave paintings on walls. As long as people could depict something, they've depicted sex. You're not going to ban that. You're just not going to. But we can be much healthier with it when we are. And this is an international thing, we are still a world of people who are scared to talk about naked people doing naked people things with each other. And until we can, you and I have been talking now for 20, 25 minutes about pornography. We've not described one graphic scene yet. What we need to do is recognize you don't have to talk about the content of pornography to talk about it in general. And we need to be able to talk about it if we're going to address this problem, because the statistics are getting pretty damn scary.
Absolutely. I would agree with you. In regards to yourself and, living out this addiction. Were you in any relationships during your experience with the addiction, and how did it?
Every relationship I ever had was because I think I had my first girlfriend at 13 or 14, but I was a porn addict from the day I saw it at 12. So it pretty much played out throughout. And yes, like a lot of, the difference to me between a recreational user and an addicted user, one of the biggest signs is that the recreational user, when they have a partner, their use drops very dramatically. They use porn as a surrogate for either physical stimulation or the sense of love that oxytocin, the chemical in your brain, gives you. It's just a surrogate for that stuff. So when they get a partner, they're not masturbating to pornography as much. Addicted people may have that little bump where they don't have that much, that they slow down, but they have to stick with it because it's serving a different master. And that's one thing that I always have to drive home to the partners to understand. This is not that your husband is picking these videos over you. This is not that your wife is looking at these pictures of guys with abs because you don't have any. If they're addicted, it serves a completely different master. It serves the chemicals in the brain that are screaming nonstop to be released. The dopamine, oxytocin that I just mentioned, serotonin, all your endorphins. These are the things, these are the pleasure chemicals in the brain that make us feel good. And we learn very early on that, gee, masturbating to pornography feels really good. I think when I feel bad, I can do this and it makes me feel better. If you're feeling bad that you don't have a partner, well, once you get a partner, you don't need that anymore. But if you are using because you've got this background of abuse, you've got this background of trauma, I don't care how many partners you line up. None of them are going to defeat it for you. And they didn't cause it and they can't stop it. And unfortunately, for a lot of partners, that's hard to understand early on that it's not a rejection of you. I tell people, how could my wife have had anything to do with my porn addiction? I became a porn addict at 12. I met her at 26. That's 14 years of being a porn addict. How could she have done anything? And by that point, 14 years into it, I'm so good at hiding it. It was easy to hide it for another 8 or 9 years. If I could hide it from my mom, and living under her roof, I could hide it from anybody. And that's what happened until the day came that it just enough was enough, too much was too much. And, that old cliche, you got sick and tired of getting sick and tired and, got my shit together. But yeah, that's really it that people have to understand. An addicted user is different than the person who is just using as a surrogate for sex, as a chance to get off. That's there's nothing wrong with that. As long as the porn stays legal, as long as you're not forcing it on anybody, as long as you're not hurting anybody, as long as you're not developing an addiction, I'm not going to tell you that it's unhealthy for you. I'll never tell you it's healthy because I've yet to read a single report, a single study that says porn is healthy for you. But I think for the vast majority of people, it isn't necessarily unhealthy. Those who are not addicts, similar to the way that there are people who can go to a bar and have one or two beers. I don't know how you do that. I've never been able to do that. I will have one or two, and then I'll have one or two more, and then one or two more, and then one or two more. Because if two feels good, well, won't eight feel four times better? And you get into that stupid logic and that stinking thinking, as they call it. So I know when it comes to porn, I know when it comes to alcohol, I can't have a little bit. I can't even touch the stuff. I can go gamble, on a football game, or I can go to a casino. I can spend 20 minutes there and walk away. I don't have that gambling gene, but I know people who do. I've seen people who do. Who knows why we get the exact addictions we get, but it is different than just being a recreational user, and that's important for people to recognize.
What did your life look like when what did it take? What situation were you in your life that finally made you say, there's a problem here? I need to address it, or something is wrong. Let me try and discover what's
There were
happening
so
here.
many. Yeah, there were so many. I got fired from my job. I got in trouble with the cops. I was being a crappy father and a crappy husband and a crappy son. The day before I was fired, I was picking up my son at my parents' house, and my mom looked at me and said, "You look like you're going to die." And I was just like, well, no, the next film festival's coming up. I'm very busy and the new magazine's coming out soon. So I'm just like, no, but your skin doesn't look right. Your hair doesn't look right. You look like you're going to die. And she wasn't joking. I only give even odds, Jake, that maybe not even odds that I'd be here to talk to you now, because I think I would have got into more things. I can tell you I was starting to look for amphetamines because I couldn't sleep. I had to be up all the time to work on my businesses and to do all these other projects. I know I could have fallen into that very easily. I know I could have gotten into some, even more major problems with the police. I should have driven my car into a house or into a crowd or killed somebody. The amount of times I drove drunk, my first rehab I went to was actually for alcohol. And the day I recognized that I had a true problem with alcoholism was about 6, 7 days in. I thought I'd just go there and play along and, smile and make everybody happy. And they had us do the math on how many times we'd driven drunk in our life. And it was like, okay, well, let's figure, probably 2 times a week. Since 16 years old, when I could drive, I started driving drunk immediately. And at that point, when I was in rehab, I think I had just turned 38. So when you're looking at 2 times a week times that, it ended up being something ridiculous, like damn near 3,000 times or 2,900 times. I don't remember it exactly, but it was like, oh my goodness. Well, I got lucky that I never got nabbed for an OUI. I got pulled over plenty of times, but the police would be like, "Oh, Mr. Shea, where are you headed?" "I'm headed home." "Where do you live?" "Well, I live blah, blah, blah." "Okay, well, we'll give you an escort there." Why? Because I was on the city council. And do you know who deals with the policeman's budget? The city councilors. So they didn't want to
Yeah.
piss me off. And they didn't want me to write anything bad about them in my magazine. I was a big supporter of them in my magazine. So they kind of allowed me to get away with it. And I look back and it's like I was such a good gaslighter. I should have had a doctorate in gaslighting because I feel like I was able to create a community of enablers. The last 2, 3 years that I was an alcoholic, I almost never paid for a beer. Everybody bought them for me because they wanted to curry favor with me. I was a local celebrity and it all came crashing down. But I'll tell you, I love the fact that I can go out to eat now and I don't have people coming up to my table and trying to talk politics with me. I love the fact I can go out to eat now and people don't recognize me and don't know who I am and don't want to pitch me a story idea for the next episode, for the next issue of the magazine. Um, there's something, when I was an addict, I had a huge, huge ego. I had very little compassion. I had very little empathy. I was me, me, me. And one of the things that I always talk to my clients about is that, yes, we're going to work on your addiction, but that's not going to be the hard part. We need to work on you as a person. What is it that you're not doing? What is it that's not connecting? And the reality was, Jake, that I almost cared what strangers thought of me more than I cared about what my family thought about me or what my close friends thought about me. They were going to be there no matter what. They had to be. But getting strangers to love my magazine, getting strangers to vote for me, getting the adulation of people was so important. And over the, 8.5 years that I've been in recovery now, I don't go for that. And I love that. I love the fact that it's very important to me what a few people think of me, but not very many. And the rest of people, I hope they like me. If not, I'll survive. I'll be just fine.
Is there a difference between alcohol recovery and porn recovery?
Not really. I mean, obviously, there are different side effects. If you're a food addict, you're probably going to have a heart attack before you're a
Yeah.
porn addict. If you're a gambling addict, you're probably going to lose the house or lose your kid's college fund before you're a cocaine addict. If you're a cocaine addict, there's going to be physical issues going on that aren't with others. So every addiction has its own interesting set of side effects. But like I try to say, addiction is addiction is addiction is addiction. Cocaine addiction doesn't take place in the nose. Food addiction doesn't take place in the stomach. And sex and porn addiction doesn't take place between your legs. It all takes place up here between your ears. That's where the addiction is. That's where the chemicals are. That's where it's trying to control you, is up there. So almost all addiction, when you look at it on a chemical cellular level, is pretty much the same. There are little differences. There are, some are more intense than others. Things like heroin and meth addiction are absolutely, insidious when you look at how addictive they are. But, there are people who are addicted to caffeine. There are people who are addicted to pizza. These release different level of chemicals in our brain, the pleasure chemicals, like I mentioned, which I think there's 7 of them total. We usually just say dopamine because that's the thing everybody talks about, but there are 7 different chemicals in there, and serotonin and oxytocin being the other 2 biggest ones. These are the things that we go after, but these are the things that are screaming at us that it needs more, more, more. You feel better when you have these chemicals. Go for it, go for it. But what happens is it's almost like you drown out you burn off the nerve endings in your brain when it comes to that pleasure. So like an addiction of alcohol, where you have to drink more and more and more. I eventually had to stop drinking beer. I couldn't get drunk. I had to move to higher alcohol content stuff. I had to move to hard liquor. Just like, the person who gambles, you can start with $20 a hand of blackjack, but pretty soon, if you want that same thrill, it has to be $50. You want that same thrill, it has to be $100. And porn is no different. Most people talk about they start watching very vanilla, one man, one woman kind of stuff. And over time, it escalates and it changes and it becomes more extreme. And it's not because your tastes have become more extreme. I hear from my clients all the time, and I was the same way, where it's like, I'm not interested in some of this stuff that I've watched. I would run screaming the other way if somebody threatened to piss on me. But for some reason, oh my God, there's porn of this, and it did it for me that day. And people are like, oh, am I gay or am I bisexual because I was watching this kind of pornography? And I always have to say, you are not the porn that you watch. It's just like any other addiction. It escalates and it escalates. And what once did it for you isn't going to do it for you. And that's why it gets worse and worse over time. And I get a lot of wives and girlfriends saying, oh my God, I discovered he was looking at gay porn. What does this mean? And it just means that he was trying to get off one night and it was gay porn that did it. Because I bet you anything, he doesn't care. Most people who I talk to who are full on addicts, they don't even care what's on the screen anymore. They don't care if it's man or woman or somewhere in between. They don't care what the people are doing. They just want to see it. They want to masturbate. They want to trigger those chemicals into action, and they want to get on with their life because it's no longer a pleasurable activity for them. It's really just about maintenance. It's almost like taking their medicine. They're just chasing that tiny little high that they once got in abundance. They're just trying to get a little trickle of those chemicals at this point to get through their day, and that's when life becomes very, very unmanageable.
Let's say someone has just listened to this conversation right now and they're reflecting on their life, and maybe they've had a realization like, hey, I have a porn addiction, and maybe they're curious or wondering now, what do they do? And obviously
Well,
it's quite a subjective question, and it's a big one, but just a
yep.
generic situation like that, what do you think someone should do right now?
I I think you need to do 2 things, or you need to find 2 people. First, you need to find somebody who has been through this and is successful. Almost everybody I know who has been successful has, it doesn't have to be a sponsor in a 12-step group. It can just be somebody who's been through it and will talk to you. It can be a friend, a mentor. Find somebody who you can ask questions to where it's not going to be embarrassing, where it's not going to be judging. One of the most beautiful things I see on my first calls with potential clients is I'll tell them, hey, I don't care what you looked at. I don't care what you saw. We're here because you're sick. And after a few minutes, they realize, gee, he really doesn't care what I did. He really doesn't care what I looked at. And I tell them, whatever you saw, I'm sure I saw it too. And I have heard stories from some of my clients that would, peel your toenails back. They're so graphic and so, outside of what even I was interested in. But you know what? No judgment, doesn't matter. Let's get you healthy. And you see this change in their body, of their posture, when they realize, oh my God, this is a guy I can talk to about this, who's not going to judge me, and I can be open, and I can name websites, and I can use slang terms for body parts, and this guy doesn't care. There's a lot of people out there like that. You can find them. So they don't have to be coaches or therapists. You can find people like that out there, and I think it's great to have them. The second person you need to find is someone who is a professional who has worked with people, simply because they know the details, they know the histories, they know what works, they know what doesn't work. They have schooling and training to help you get through this. When I decided I was going to be a coach, I threw myself into the schooling part of it. I went to get certified. I wanted to be certified for betrayal trauma as well, so I could help with both people. When I recognized how often couples needed to get together and really let the truth come out, I became certified as a therapeutic disclosure specialist, because that's such an important thing. And I just want to be able to help this entire, dynamic, but you need somebody who knows what they're doing. For instance, with the therapeutic disclosure, it's really easy on a random Tuesday night to not be able to find something on Netflix with your partner, and they ask a question or you ask a question, and it just devolves from there and turns into a fight. And not just a fight about whatever's going on that day, but oh my goodness, in 2016 you said this to me, and what were you meaning in 2019 when this happened, and what was that girl's name in 2020, and who was that man that you were talking to 2 years ago, and all kinds of things like this come out. There is a way to get through this process, because you can hurt your relationship. You can harm your relationship beyond repair if you're not careful. So I always tell people, if you think you have a problem, talk to somebody who's been there, talk to somebody who knows their stuff, because you can get a baseline from both of these people. If somebody comes to me and says, well, I do have people who come to me, and at the end of a 45-minute or hour-long interview, I tell them, listen, I don't think you're an addict. I think maybe you use and you're embarrassed. I think maybe you use and you're ashamed, but you're not fitting the addict profile. I will flat out tell people that. There are times where, I'm dealing with a betrayal trauma client, and she's like, "You've got to meet my husband. You've got to talk to him." And then I'll talk to him, and I have to say afterwards, I'm sorry, but he's not an addict. Maybe it would be easier for you if he was, because it would be a medical problem. He's just a shitty partner. Sorry, he's not an addict. You have a
Yeah.
bad picker, and you picked a bad guy because he doesn't care about you. But it's not addiction. And I hate having to say that, because I think that can make people feel even more helpless when
Mm.
you can't pin it on porn addiction. I know that there are some partners I've talked to who it's almost a relief to find out it's addiction. It's not them. Because honestly, if they're not an addict, it may be that they're bored with you. It may be that you don't do it for them anymore. It may be all these horrible things that people fear. If they're an addict, it's not that. But I have to share that with people, and I've been there, and I've talked to enough that I know. And I think that's why I've been popular as a coach, is because that I have both the history myself of being a porn addict. And I always say, I still have a very good porn addict to English dictionary. I can translate what any porn addict says. I can translate what any partner says into English, and I can help them communicate with each other. But I also have that history. I have read dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of studies and reports, whether it's about kids and pornography, whether it's about marriage with pornography, whether it's just about what happens to your nervous system, whether it's women or minorities and how they are increasing with porn addiction. Whatever the issue may be, I have probably studied it and can talk to you about it. And that, I think, is what makes me a coach that a lot of people connect with, is that I know my stuff, but that's also because I experienced this stuff.
Yeah, beautiful. And it's awesome you do that. Like offering an empty space for someone, that is what we need as human beings, is to be able to just conversate with someone and connect with them and really offload, like unload and express ourselves, and to not be rebutted or judged or
Nope.
persecuted. It's just to be fully accepted, especially if you're on a recovery journey, especially if you're wanting to really turn your life around. We need people like that and like yourself. So I'm really glad that you decided to come on the podcast. Um, in
Thank you.
regards to the pandemic, right? Because going through, well, prior COVID-19, we didn't necessarily have to stay in our homes, and obviously it's a lot more lenient now. But there were what 2 years where everyone was forced inside of their homes. A lot of people would have been alone. So I'm interested to hear about how you think the pandemic changed the way that people viewed and used porn. Like, what impact did that have?
Yeah. Well, my third book is called Porn in the Pandemic, and it's more of if you're more interested in my journalism type writing, that's what it's about. Because once the pandemic hit, I had all kinds of folks like yourself contacting me, like, "What's this going to mean? What's this going to mean?" And it's like, okay, well, I better start studying this immediately.
Yeah.
You look at some of the strongholds. Where did COVID hit first? France, Spain, Italy. Pornhub, the website, started offering free access
Mm,
to their users over there.
30
And
days.
you saw a day to day, 2019 to 2020, you saw an increase of anywhere from 60 to 80% of traffic. And this was just the early users.
Wow.
And you can look at websites, and the websites exploded during the pandemic. Obviously, people are stuck at home. What are you going to do at home? It was the perfect storm for these places. But the true legacy of what I believe is going to come out of the pandemic is not porn addiction from the consumer's side. It's porn addiction from the producer's side. On January 1st, 2020, there were roughly 300,000 people making pornography on OnlyFans. On Janu on January 1st, 2022, there were over 2 million people making pornography on OnlyFans.
Wow.
So during the pandemic, 1.7 million people worldwide joined just this one website to do the do it yourself at home pornography stuff. And when you think about those people who got furloughed and laid off, it was the shop girls, it was waiters, it was bartenders, waitresses, hostesses, all of these people who work in service industries who generally are young, generally are outgoing and good with customers, and generally care about their appearance. That's perfect for those kinds of sites. So if it's not that, it could be a cam site. So there was an explosion of people going to these types of pornography to make it at home so they could pay their rent or pay whatever. And I'm not going to judge anybody who has to pay their rent or feed their kid, but we saw this explosion. So what I did was, when I was working on the research for the book, at the very early part, I interviewed a whole bunch of men and women, some who were veterans, but mostly newbies to both campsites and OnlyFans. And they were excited about, this is going to be scary, but exciting. And, I'm looking forward to making really good money and blah, blah, blah. 3 months later, when I was finishing up my research, I contacted the same people. And the veterans were the same people. They could tell me how their users had changed, how there was more anxiety out there, how people were getting a little bit crazy because they'd been inside too much. And that was really interesting to get what the porn consumers, how they had changed. But when I talked to these people who had just begun being porn models at the beginning of the pandemic, 3 months later, I remember this one really sweet girl, she's 20 or 21. She was like, in my real life, I could never get a date. In my real life, guys would never look at me. Now I've got guys who will pay me $25 to see my ass. I've got guys who I could go anywhere in the world and go on a date tonight. I've got guys who have offered to marry me. I feel so special when I'm here. I feel so pretty. I just love talking to all my fans. And it's like, holy shit, do you know what I'm hearing? I'm hearing somebody gets a giant dopamine boost off of making pornography. Now, when you think about it, Jake, isn't consuming pornography and making pornography kind of just different sides of the same coin? And
Yeah.
what I truly believe is that with this explosion of people making pornography, that come 20 years from now, the way that high-speed internet's been around about 20 years now, so we can study the effects on people who have been consumers of porn, we're going to be able to study the effects of people who have been producing porn. And I have a feeling that, 20 years from now, we're going to be looking at 45, 50-year-old women and men who are still making porn, probably making less money than they're making now, but they're not doing it for the money. They're doing it for that dopamine hit, to be told they're special, to be told they look good, to get a little bit of attention. And that's kind of sad, but I think that's what the true fallout of pornography from the pandemic is going to be. I think that's what we're going to be talking about years from now. Is when somebody's a porn addict, we may have to ask, making or viewing.
It shows a lot about the culture of the world, like society, our values. But then you
Well,
obviously spoke about, how people need to pay their rent and they have bills to pay. So you're going to do whatever you can to feed your family, to feed your child. How, sorry to just interrupt you here. How do you see the landscape of porn growing? Because it just seems like everything is just expanding. So, it started
it's
with a magazine.
we can't stop it, but we can understand it. And we can understand, I tell whenever I go to a library or someplace and give a speech, there's always a parent who like, well, we've got blockers on our kids' phones. And it's like there's 5 billion smartphones in this world, and you've blocked off one of them. Great job. You've pretty
Yeah.
much taken care of the porn problem single-handedly. Wow. No, it's not a matter of if your kid is going to see porn. It's a matter of when they're going to see porn. And if you don't know what they're going to say, if you don't know what they're going to do, you haven't porn-proofed your kid. And what you have to do is raise them in a society where it's not taboo, but raise them in a society where they have some respect. Now, I go back to my high school days. We didn't the I got on the internet for the first time my senior year of high school, and that was on my own, nothing to do with the school. Now, I know if there was that super sexy cheerleader and that super buff football player who were always ended up dating each other, if there was a picture of them from like the beach and she was in a tiny little bikini and he was in his short shorts and his abs were all looking all good, people would have passed that photo around like, "Oh my God, did you see the picture? Did you see the picture?" Because they're almost naked in it. So let's see the picture. Now, that was back when I was in high school. What's happening now with social media? Take just Instagram, for instance, which is one of the more tame ones compared to TikTok or Snapchat. Take Instagram. It's almost expected that every 15 or 16-year-old is going to have nearly naked photos of themselves on these pages. That's why people say, "I'm going to go creep your photos." What are you creeping for? The sexy stuff. Well, no kidding. And so we've had a generation that's under 30 years old that has grown up that doesn't remember or know a world before the internet, certainly not high speed internet. And so having access to pornography since they've been, 8 years old at the way that they can have it now, there aren't the taboos, there aren't the morality issues, there aren't all of these ethics surrounding sexuality, surrounding nudity. What is the difference between a girl the day before her 17th birthday and on her 18th birthday? While she can only wear a bikini online on her 17th, the day before her 18th birthday, on her 18th birthday, she can drop that top and charge guys 20 bucks each to see what's there. She can make $1,000 that first day. Well, geez, if she doesn't have, body issues, if she's not worried about people seeing her boobs, if she doesn't care about that, same thing with a guy. If he doesn't care people are checking out his junk, put it out there, make tons of money. Well, the younger generation is much more okay with this. than the older generation. And that's what I fear, is that, there's going to be fallout from doing this, but these people may raise another generation of kids before we really see what the difference is. And, I try to drive home the point again and again. This, when parents want to talk about their kids about porn, it is not the birds and the bees speech. This is not about how babies are made. This is not about what the naked people are doing in the porn. This is like the don't smoke cigarettes speech. This is like the don't drink speech. You can't drink in my home until you're 18. You can't smoke in my home until you're 18. Or, you have to you will decide when you're old enough what you want to do, but you're 9 years old now, and we don't drink and smoke in this house. Okay. And when you're old enough, you'll be able to decide. Same thing with pornography. We don't look at pornography in this house. This is not healthy for you. When you're old enough, you can make your own decisions on it. That's all that has to be said. It now needs to be part of the don't do drugs, don't drink, don't smoke, whatever, don't do X, Y, and Z speeches that parents give. We now have to have pornography be part of it. And I think that we can make it age appropriate as the child ages, because they're going to see it. They're going to want to see it. And that's okay. That's normal, but there's a way to usher them into it. And right now, what we've been doing for the last 20 years, and what we've been doing even before that, back to my day, is not saying a damn thing. And people are traversing this on their own. And in my case, you end up walking into a big pit of, quicksand, and you get sucked in, and it's tough to get out of it. 24 years as a porn addict, 22 years as an alcoholic. I hate all of the time that I lost, but thank God I have this time now, and thank God that I'm lucky enough to be helping other people, defeat their demons.
Yeah, sex is such a taboo subject here in the West. Like they speak about it a
Yeah.
lot. Oh no, sorry. Yeah, it is actually. Like I feel like the older generation, the outer generation who raised like myself and the ones coming up now, they're like really conservative and they don't talk about
Yeah.
these things. You know, my parents never told me about the birds and the bees story.
Yeah.
I was in
No.
primary school and a friend of mine brought a phone to school. This is when phones like first started becoming like a mainstream thing, like mobile phones. And I was like, what is that? Right. And so so we all viewed that, but it needs to be normalized. Like just being able to have a conversation. I don't have children myself, but I mean, it's not hard. Well, it doesn't seem hard to just have a human to human conversation around sex or pornography and how we
No.
navigate through these situations. So do you think that is the best way to keep kids safe? Just normalize the conversations. Are there any other things you would
Absolutely.
recommend parents do?
Absolutely. No, I mean, just make it age appropriate. At 5 years old, all you have to say is, hey, you're not allowed to take pictures of anybody without their bathing suit on or without their clothes on. And nobody is allowed to take pictures of you without your bathing suit or your clothes on. Okay? Leave it at that. Maybe when they go off to school, hey, there might be people who have tablets or phones, and there may be people without their clothes on that they may show you pictures of or little movies of. If you see this, can you come let me know? Because kids aren't supposed to see these kinds of films. It's not good for them. Just like you're not supposed to smoke, cigarettes like grandma does or whatever. And kids want to learn. Kids want to do the right thing. Kids are looking for approval. Kids are looking to do, to make their parents happy. Kids want to be healthy. And I think that if you can, slowly raise them into this, by the time a boy is 13 or 14 years old, you can start talking about porn induced erectile dysfunction at 13 or 14. Odds are they've already seen porn by that point. And these boys, it's not that they want to become porn addicts. It's not that they want to, have any of this. They want a girlfriend for the most part. But when they can't get one, again, the surrogacy of porn, they'll use pornography. And I think that if we can tell them about porn induced erectile dysfunction, that, hey, you watch too much of this when you're 14, 15, 16, 17. By the time you're 18, your penis can pretty much break. No girl is going to want to be with you at that point if you can't, perform normally. So be careful when you're using this stuff, son. be careful when you're using this stuff because it can lead to bad things if you use too much of it. Maybe that's scaring them, but that's also telling them the damn truth because 20-year-olds, according to recent statistics, 20-year-olds when I was 20, which is now 25 years ago, erectile dysfunction issues, 2 to 4% of the population that was 20 years old. Now it's 20 to 25% of the population. I would guess that 3/4 of my clients under 30 years old have experienced erectile dysfunction because of pornography. I think that's the kind of thing that may just scare some people straight, some people into not using so much when they're 13, 14, 15. Maybe they won't start to develop some of these habits so young. Could still happen later on, but I absolutely believe that for both men and women, the seeds of pornography addiction are sown in those years of puberty.
What's the how would I cue this? People, clients you work with alongside with as well, a mentor, who have experienced this betrayal trauma. What do they? And obviously everyone's different, but is there like a common theme amongst them? What do they? Oh, sorry, what they struggle with the most?
Well, usually it's that they had something to do with causing the problem. Unfortunately, when you confront a porn addict, you're going to get one of three responses. About a third of the time, the person will go, "Yes, yes, thank God you got me. Yes. Oh, please, let's get me some help."
Mm.
About a third of the time, you'll have somebody who, maybe you have a point. Let me think about this. This is new information, but I'm not discounting it. They need to process a little. And then you've got a third who are like, me, a porn addict? It's not me, it's you. You're not sexy. You're not fun. You're the problem. It's not me, it's you. I was fine before you, because they don't want to admit that they may actually have a brain disease, which is what addiction is. And they don't want to admit that they would have to do the hard work. And for many addicts, they can't imagine their life without their addiction. When you think about it, it's kind of crazy that, okay, well, Josh, you've got these two things, alcohol and porn, that have always been there for you, that have always made you feel good. Now we need you to stop both of them at the same time and see if you can figure things out. What in the fuck are you talking about? I need this stuff. I need this stuff. And you don't, but a lot of people who are active addicts think they do. So, really, the first thing that has to occur is that it needs to be established that it's not the partner's fault, that the partner has absolutely nothing to do with it. And I gave that example of the fact I was a porn addict for 12 years before I met my wife. How could she contribute to it? How could she be part of it if she wasn't even there when the seeds were being planted? She can't. Now, she still could have every right to think, maybe I'm not pretty enough. Maybe I'm not good enough in bed. Maybe I'm not whatever, this or that. But it has nothing to do with the partner. And that's really the first part that has to be driven home. It has nothing to do with the partner. And quite often that partner needs some trauma work as well, because I've not seen another addiction compared to pornography or sex, infidelity, that does the number on the partner as much as porn or sex addiction.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to ask you a quick one here about infidelity. Could you give like a rough estimate, or have you come across a statistic that has correlated like viewing porn, watching porn, having a porn addiction, and then people cheating on their spouse, on their
And this
husband?
is actually fascinating. And I've never seen the exact reason why. I've not seen a study why these numbers are the way they are. But roughly 20% of men who are porn addicts will act out outside of a relationship. When it comes to women, it's closer to 75% when they are porn addicts that they
Wow.
will act out outside of a
Oh,
relationship.
wow.
And like I said, we can come up with all kinds of theories why,
Mm.
but this is what the data that I've seen suggests. Maybe it's just that women can get laid a lot easier than men. I don't know. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's that they assign a level of intimacy that porn doesn't reach for them, so they need to go further with it than men who get their needs met with pornography. So I don't know exactly why that the case is, but when someone is an addict, when it's a woman, far more likely they are going to act out in infidelity than they will a man.
Yeah, I was just thinking about like this generic thing of, women, like any man is all like, I always feel like a man is hungry. This is like generic, but a man would be interested in most females, but then, roles reverse. The male has to, assert his dominance or give off some type of status. He has to,
It's
you know what I mean?
yeah,
It's
it's
so much
origin of the
easier.
species stuff. Yeah, it's all Darwin stuff where, if you follow Darwin and believe in, his theories that people pick the best suitable mate they can, and there are a lot of women who can pick from a lot of men, but men can't necessarily pick from all the women because women seem to have a higher criteria and an easier time saying no, so they pick the higher quality men.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are the last two questions that I like to ask on the podcast, and it's just a moment to celebrate you and your
Yeah, I'm,
achievements.
I'm, I'm all about celebrating me.
So I want to ask you, what are you most proud of doing in this life?
I'm proud of having two kids that I'm not embarrassed by, that they haven't done any actions that have reflected real badly on me, that they are their own individuals. It's not that they're scared to death of life. They grab life. My daughter's 23 and has owned a house for a year. She has her own business that's thriving. My son is a sophomore at a really good college. I am so proud of, despite my addictions, despite how bad I was, my wife did such an amazing job raising those kids. And I'm just proud that now I can be the partner and now I can be the father that I was supposed to be.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, congratulations. Um, and the final question is, what is your hope for the world and future generations?
Um, I would like to think at some point people will learn to get over themselves, that we are so much more similar than we are different. Um, I had to turn off the news last year, maybe 2 years ago now. I just had
Good,
to turn the
good.
news off because I don't care what Donald Trump is doing. I don't care what Joe Biden is doing. I saw, the Queen died the other day. That's horrible. I don't care who's running France or Canada or, no offense, Australia or anywhere else. I don't care what's happening in politics because I can't control it anymore. And what I've needed to learn to do is to keep my side of the street clean, keep my yard clean. I can control myself. I always tell people, a lot of guys, a lot of girls love to come to me and be like, oh my God, I've gone 65 days without using. I've gone 84 days without using. I think that's fantastic. But I tell them all we have is right now. I've got over 3,100 days of being sober. I don't know what happened on day 1,383. I don't know what happened on day 2011. And am I going to make it to 4,000 days? I hope so, but there's not a lot I can do about it today except be sober right now. All we have is right now in this moment. And that's what I try to remind people is that don't look at it as a streak of 85 days. Look at it as a streak of 85 first days. You have today, you have now, and I think that's the best advice that I can give is to just keep perspective and focus on the now. Are you going to be sober in 20 years? Who knows? I guess we'll find out when we get there. And, are we going to go back to having abortion rights in America straight through? I don't know. I'm not going to be the one to decide it, but I'll be there when it happens. And I can't get myself wrapped into an abortion debate or a death penalty debate or all of these political things I used to get very loud about, gun control and other things like this. because it's just me yelling, and you can yell the opposite. It's not going to change my opinion. I know I can yell opposite of what you are, and it's not going to change your opinion. And I just lost so much time in my life trying to get people to think like I did, that it's like, why do I even care? You know, why do I even care about the death penalty? I don't plan on needing it. I don't plan on having any relatives attached. So why am I spending time really caring about it when there are things I can care about? My kids, my family, my pets, the work I'm personally doing. That's what it is. It's really about perspective, and it's really about narrowing it down. And I had to do that. That was kind of my biggest thing. And I look at it, the core of reaching that thing was just being able to go click and turn the news off. The only thing I'll look at the news now these days for is weather.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Joshua Shea, life coach, betrayal trauma coach, porn addiction expert, father, husband, incredible man. Congratulations on just turning your life around and actually being a light for people. Much
Thank
love
you.
to you, and may your journey continue to flourish. And thank you for your time. Thank you for showing up, and man, all the best.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you allowing me to be on this show. So many people are still antsy about talking about this stuff. So, and I'll tell you, I've been doing this long enough now where people will tell me, "Hey, 4 years ago, I heard you on a podcast, and then I went off on this journey." And it's like, wow, cool. You got better because of something I said 4 years ago, or not that I said it because I said it, but you were inspired by it. So these are the kinds of things that live out there forever. And hopefully somebody's listening and deciding to change their life based on this episode we did.
Absolutely. Thank you, Josh.